Welcome to the Living a Nordic Life podcast, where we explore a simpler, cosier and more intentional life the Nordic way. I'm Fiona McKenna, your Nordic living guide and founder of Living a Nordic Life, where I share all things Nordic living and show you that a Nordic life is the way to bring intentional calm and healthy habits into your own life, wherever you are in the world. Are you looking for ways to bring simplicity, coziness and calm into your life? Well, let me show you how. Visit the Living a Nordic Life website to explore how I can help you on your journey to simple, healthy and happy calm, the Nordic way. You can subscribe to the podcast right here. And if you want regular inspirational emails sent with love from Norway and straight to your inbox, don't forget to subscribe to the Living a Nordic Life newsletters. And so now let's dive into our episode. Today I want to talk about nostalgia, and in particular how you can purposefully and intentionally bring nostalgia into your life. Now, nostalgia is not just neon 80s tracksuits and 1970s dinner party menus. You know, the kind of thing I'm talking about. Prawn cocktails and Black Forest Gatto, that kind of thing. But what is it? Nostalgia is all about a longing for the past, or something in the past, whether you've experienced it yourself or not. And because it doesn't have to be something that you have actually experienced, you can easily bring it into your own life without having to have had that life experience yourself. Now, if you read my blog regularly or you listen to this podcast, or if you live a Nordic life, you might have gathered by now that a lot of Nordic living is about simplicity and intentionally making the most of the simple things in life. It's also about a connection to nature, the environment and the past, and our heritage. Heritage is very important to people in the Nordics. And that connection to the past and to a shared heritage is not only important to people in the Nordics, but people with Nordic heritage too, who might not live here in the Nordics or have ever lived, or maybe never visited. Traditions that have been passed down through generations are kept alive, and family heirlooms are really cherished. This is most obvious at the cabin. There's an entire culture dedicated to cabin life. And you might be surprised to learn that nearly 25% of people here in Norway own a cabin. They're often nothing fancy or elaborate or luxurious. And many of them don't have electricity or running water or even a flushing toilet. That's part of the allure of it, that simplicity. Many cabins are owned by families and they've been passed down through generations. Or they might be on family land, so that in itself holds a huge amount of significance. And simple traditional decor is key to making your cabin cosy and welcoming. Even the most modern cabins lean towards a simpler and more rustic style of decor. And it's this keeping tight hold of the past that makes it so cosy and welcoming and nostalgic. Nostalgia is something that's been proven to make us happy. Who'd have thought that? It releases dopamine in the brain, which is the body's special natural happy hormone. And that raises our base level of happiness, and it makes us think of special times, simpler times and happier times, whether we've experienced them or not. And like I said, you don't actually have to have experienced something nostalgic yourself to enjoy the nostalgia in it and to make the most of it. So I'm going to tell you how you can bring that into your life yourself. If you're not already, you probably find you already are. But first of all, let's look at how people in the Nordics enjoy and make the most of nostalgia in their lives. Because I think probably when you think about it, initially, everything Nordic is feels very modern. That's most people's first impression. Very modern, clean lines, sleek, everything new. But it's not. And this is where cabins so often come into it. Most cabins are made of natural materials that blend seamlessly into the natural world around them, which is perfect because lots of them are in areas of incredible natural beauty, like mountainsides and in forests and by the sea. And it would be really strange to see something ultra modern sitting in that kind of environment. You do see them, but they're mostly old. And if they're not old, they certainly have that old nostalgic feel to them. They stick to traditional styles of architecture with romantic and nostalgic carved wood door frames and elaborate carved wood ends to the beams on the outside. You know the kind of thing I'm talking about, don't you? And of course, most of them are made almost entirely from wood, just as they have been for hundreds of years. And if they're not made entirely of wood, if they're modern and they do have a metal frame, because of course we have certain planning regulations here, you can't just go and build whatever you want. Things have to be to a certain safety standard. They're clad on the outside with wood, so they look like they're old. It's very clever. But these traditional style cabins are the ones that command the highest prices because people want to be reminded of the past and of the part they're playing in bringing it into the future. They're custodians of that. And probably making something nostalgic for future generations to feel good about too. We don't always realise we're doing it, do we? But you know that you're making something for your kids and your grandkids and beyond. So, of course, in this kind of cabin and this kind of building, you couldn't have super modern decor. And most people don't want to. They want to bring some kind of olden day romance and nostalgia into their cabin life to make it an escape from modern life, especially if they live in a modern apartment or a very modern house. And they want to get away from the hustle and bustle. That's the whole reason of taking a cabin trip and having a cabin or renting a cabin. It's that simplicity and that nostalgia. Now, this kind of life is so popular that there is an entire industry dedicated to hygge, that's cabin decor, and the special type of nostalgia that goes with it. And although many items that you can buy in the shops are new, they stick rigidly to this idea of nostalgia, simplicity, and tradition. Think of woolen blankets, copper pans, copper ladles, lots of wood and handcrafted items, and all those things that are really tactile. You want to pick them up and touch them. And you know that lots of people have done the same before, maybe hundreds of years before. Something about that, isn't there? Picking something up and you know that it was used by somebody 100 years ago. And it was designed to be used, not just looked at. And plenty of vintage style photos and pictures. And some of those are very modern, but they're very, well, new, not modern. They're very traditional kind of 1920s, 1900s style advertising posters for particular resorts. I'm sure you know the kind of thing I'm talking about. They're lovely. They were beautifully designed then, and they're being reproduced, and it gives that lovely nostalgic feel. And the cabin is the perfect time to show that Nordic appreciation of craftsmanship. Handcrafted items and handicrafts that are done in a traditional way are highly sought after here, and they're highly valued. If you want to learn more about that, go back to one of my previous podcast episodes, and I talk about that appreciation of craftsmanship that is so unique to the Nordics. And it means that people that make those things, that keep those things alive, those skills alive, are able to earn a decent living from it. Not just kind of scraping together, and then of course those skills get lost because nobody can afford to keep doing them. And in other countries where they might be thought of as being something that could be so easily mass produced, they're kept alive. Those traditional skills are highly prized and highly valued. And people expect to pay a good sum for a beautifully handcrafted sweater in a traditional pattern. That's really important as well. You're not going to get a handmade sweater for anything less than a couple of $100. Or maybe a hand-carved bowl or hand-painted rosemaling. Now, I know that Norway is not the only place where you can get things like that. And I know that if you have a little look, particularly in places like Wisconsin, where there is a huge industry in traditional Nordic painting, rosemary, on wood, you know that it's not cheap. It takes an awful long time and a huge amount of skill. It's a very specific style of painting. And so the people who are making them are able to support themselves and keep these wonderful traditions alive and thriving, and passing them on to the next generation by teaching people. Cabins are the places where people like to display these traditional items. It's often not the right decor for their house or apartment, and especially if you're looking at something that's not necessarily straight out of an IKEA catalogue, but you know the kind of thing I'm talking about. You know, very modern, sleek, white lines, lots of shiny wood, and black and white and monotones, and the odd statement piece, but not all these handcrafted nostalgic items. They might be out of place. But there's some kind of unwritten rule that that kind of decor was perfect at the cabin. People expect to see it there. It's a place to take some family heirlooms, the things that you cherish because they're nostalgic and they remind you of these cosy times, but you don't necessarily want them in your house. Many people will have cabin furniture and cabin crockery that they've had for decades, or that was passed on with the cabin itself, that maybe belonged to their mother or their parents and their grandparents, and maybe even beyond. And it stays there. And every generation it adds a little bit more interest to it, doesn't it? And at this point I should probably tell you about some very special sort of cabins that you get here in Norway. They're a different class of cabin, and it's a deeper way of life and a link to the past that is truly unique. So like I said, lots of cabins are old, and some are very old. And I'm not talking 50 years or 100 years, I'm talking several hundred years at least, maybe 400 years or even 500 years old. And over the years, the contents have been kept carefully in them, almost like this kind of living museum. A nostalgia living museum that you stay in and you are part of. These cabins are rarely updated, but they're kept as they were, say, 200 or even 300 years ago, with wood-burning stoves, no running water, though that's not unusual, and candles for lights. And the people who own them or stay in them like to dress up from that era and be within that era wholeheartedly when they're staying at the cabin. It's a complete escape. You might have a cabin from 1800, and when the owners go to stay in it, they dress as if they were from the 1800s. It's not very common, but it's fun. Phones and technology play no part at all in the life of that cabin. And they're reminded of nostalgic, cosy and simpler times that have been, and the connection they're feeling with it every time they stay. Admittedly, times were not always so happy and simple. It was hard work. But we're picking the bits that we want. We don't have to remember all those bits. We're picking the bits that make us feel good. And it's a wonderful way to keep connected to the past. So why do we even want nostalgia in our lives? Well, for a start, like I told you, nostalgia is a great way to raise our base level of happiness, and we're trying to do that all the time, aren't we? With simple pleasures. Simple things, those simple daily luxuries that we enjoy, like using a favourite mug. Or a special cup and saucer. Don't save it, use it. They were designed to be used. Or getting out the good crockery. Having some flowers in the house. Growing your own fruit and vegetables. Using that special soap. All these things make us feel good. And remember those happy hormones. Dopamine. Let's get some of that if we can. And we can do it. It's also fun to bring a little bit of themed nostalgia into our lives. To imagine what it would have been like to be in a cabin in the mountains in Norway, or in the deep woods in Finland, or the wide sandy beaches of Denmark. And each time we use something that has a link to that, or look at something that we have bought with that in mind, we're reminded of that nostalgia, of that magic. It takes us to that special place and gives us that feeling of nostalgia that we're trying to achieve, whether we've been there or not. Remember that nostalgia does not have to be something that you've experienced yourself. You could create it. But what are we looking for that will bring a truly authentic, rustic, kind of hygge nostalgic feel to our lives? Let's look at how you can bring a little bit of Nordic nostalgia into your life. Let's have a look. So if you want to go all out for a Nordic cabin in the woods, here is where we start. But for most of us, we just want to add a few carefully selected items that will bring some nostalgia into our lives without going all out and having a total decor change. We don't need to do that. Most cabins will have some form of folk art in them. And this is usually something like rosemaling or some carved wood or maybe some knitted items. And it's a chance to show off a piece of beautifully handcrafted art. But maybe also have something that's a family treasure. And if it's not a family treasure yet, let's start now. All heirlooms start somewhere, don't they? They start with somebody picking something that's beautifully made and handcrafted, and not just, something that you've bought that has been in a container and brought over from China, I hate to say it, but something that is beautifully handcrafted. That can be your start of your family heirloom. Copper is a material that's hugely popular in cabins. I love copper. I guess because it was used really widely to cook in before materials like non-stick became popular. And now we know that non-stick is not terribly good for us, is it? Once it starts to, if it's new, it's okay. Once it starts to break down a little bit, it's time to throw it out. But copper pans will keep for decades and decades, and quite a lot of them have a lifetime guarantee on them if you buy them new. Or something like cast iron. Copper here in Norway is coming back into fashion in a big way. And it's not really any surprise because it's a fabulous metal to cook in. It conducts the heat really well. And not only that, but it looks lovely too. And it gives you that wonderful feeling of simple luxury every time you use it, because they are investment pieces, let's face it. But once you clean it up, or keep it clean, which I might add is very simple to do, you can Google that. If you've got dirty copper, don't go polishing it, you don't need to. You just need to put it in some hot soapy water with some vinegar in it for 10 minutes. Give it a rinse, your copper is perfect. Don't scrub. My copper pans hang on the wall in the kitchen. They look really nice and they bring some luxury to each time I cook. And that bit of nostalgia, which I love. But nostalgia for you might be something your grandparents had as kids. Or something that reminds you of your childhood. And if you don't want to start hanging things all over your wall, cabin style, then you can always create a piece of beautiful artwork in the form of a box frame, or one of those coffee tables that has the little compartments in it under the glass. You can get them in IKEA, they're called Leotorp, and they're a white square table, and you lift the glass off, or it's hinged actually, a bit like a door, and underneath are these little compartments, and you can put things in and they stay put. And then you put the lid back down and lock it down, and you can enjoy all these little heirlooms and things, or memories of things. It could be anything. It could be a train ticket, a photo, a coin that you found on the ground somewhere, a rock from somewhere special that just reminds you a little piece of that place that you've been. And it's a wonderful way to keep these mementos and to remind you of things and bring that nostalgia into your life. However you bring nostalgia into your life, be it in the form of a family heirloom or something that you've acquired recently, remember that you don't have to have experienced it yourself. That's the beauty of nostalgia. It's all about a longing and a connection to the past that helps us raise our base level of happiness. So go away now and look for some nostalgic items that you have. Hold them for a minute and get that lovely feeling. And bring them out and enjoy them. And I will see you in the next episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Living a Nordic Life newsletters so you can get an email when I release a new episode. It's a quick and easy way to keep up with all things Nordic living. Please visit livinganordiclife.com. You can listen to Living a Nordic Life on lots of podcast apps, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, and plenty of others. If you've enjoyed the Living a Nordic Life podcast, why not leave me a rating? So that's the end of Living a Nordic Life for today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.